So I'm Lesley Glover. I'm one of the team behind the Alexander Studies Online website, and I'm really delighted today to be talking to Marcus James, who is both an Alexander teacher and a psychotherapist. And we're going to be talking about the relationship between those two threads in his work. Before we start, I'm just going to say that Marcus has recently published a very interesting book, which kind of covers, in a way, some of what we're going to be talking about today. But I just want to mention that because it's a really, really lovely read. And if you're interested in this area, it's worth having a look at that. So, can I get you to introduce yourself?
Yes, I've been an Alexander Technique teacher for over 20 years. I qualified round about 2000. Um, and more recently, I've become a psychotherapist. I mean, going back as far as 2000, I guess I've also had a parallel interest in, particularly in body psychotherapy, but in therapy in general. I found that therapy and Alexander Technique started to come together naturally the more I became sort of, I guess, interested in processing and emotional processing, and the more comfortable I felt with it, I naturally found that my pupils would stuff would come up for them in
Mm,
lessons because I guess, human beings, if we feel safe and there's stuff to be processed, then very often it will come up to be processed. And so after a while, I started to find that there was a lot more emotional material coming up in lessons quite spontaneously. And I felt I was interested, and I also thought it would be responsible to find out how to deal with it more effectively, and to make sure that I was capable of with it more effectively. So that started the process of becoming a psychotherapist.
it's
Yeah.
interesting how things come up, how you can't separate
Yes.
them out
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. For me, sort of emotion and psychology I've always seen it as
Mm,
intimately related to the Alexander technique. I mean, we talk about ourselves as dealing with a psychophysical unity, and to me, it just makes absolutely no sense to say that we do that. But as has happened to an extent in the past, to say, but actually, we don't go to these places.
mm,
We're
mm.
just educators, and of course, we are educators. But because of the area that we're working in, this other stuff does come up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about what sort of psychotherapy you practice, because psychotherapy covers a big range.
Mm.
What you trained in, what your sort of model is.
Yeah. Well, I'm basically I'd say I'm a contemporary person-centered therapist. I'm very much of the view that generally speaking, if we make a space for people that is safe, where they feel heard, where they are heard, and where they can feel comfortable to unfold, then that's exactly what they'll do, and that we in those circumstances, human beings generally tend to orientate towards wholeness, towards health, and towards responsibility. So I see my job as being to create such a space. And I work through the body, so that can involve, which is maybe slightly unusual in a person-centered context. So I can we can work through movement, we can work through breath, we can work through stillness, we can work through voice, as well as normal sort of talk therapy. And all of those approaches, it's always about, well, what wants to unfold here, and so it might be, what do you want to say? It might be, what does your body want to say? But let's find out,
Mm.
and then we can explore together.
So led by the what the person brings.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say,
Really.
I think we're all psychologists. Every human being is a psychologist. We all have theories about the mind. We have theories about relationships. And as a therapist, once maybe thought about these things more than some people, but we all know this stuff.
Mm,
So I think, let's explore it together.
mm,
And that's my job.
mm,
There's one exception to that, which is sometimes I find working with trauma, one needs to be more directive. If people are caught in very distressing emotions that are sort of out of control or feel out of control, then it can be really beneficial to be more directive and guide the person, and maybe a bit of psychoeducation
Mm.
can be helpful.
Yeah. So again, it's responding to what's needed, sometimes a bit more
Yeah.
guidance, sometimes a bit more openness.
Yeah, no, I think first of all we need to be human beings, whether we're Alexander teachers or we're psychotherapists.
Mm.
First of all, we need to be a human being, and that's the starting point.
Yeah,
And then we
absolutely.
bring whatever we have to be
Yeah.
helpful.
It sounds like, you developed the interest in the psychology and feeling that you needed more skill in that area. So once you trained, where did that take you in terms of, did you practice these things separately? Did you integrate them? How and where are you now with that?
Mm. Um, well, I guess because I'd been drawn to it because of stuff that was arising in its adolescence, then immediately it was there sometimes. So, if some difficult memory or difficult feeling came up, then I might approach it slightly differently
Hmm.
than I would have done before. Although, I mean, not radically differently usually, but maybe with a bit more sensitivity or maybe with a bit more skill, hopefully. Um, and as I started practicing as a therapist, I found that sometimes Alexander was really useful to bring into that space, particularly with trauma. Actually, for some people, I find it's really, really helpful. It can help them to regulate and give them a feeling that they have some kind of agency within it.
Mm.
Um, and it can sort of build a stronger foundation where there wasn't a strong foundation, a sort of psychophysical foundation to begin with. It can help to make one. So sometimes working with a therapy client, we'll make an agreement. Let's actually do some AT for a while, or maybe let's do half a session AT and talk, or do both at the same time.
Hmm. And when you bring Alexander into therapy, are you bringing a sort of classic Alexander, let's look at body mapping, let's do some
Yeah,
sit to stand, or are you doing more of the sort of coming to quiet or both or
certainly more of the focus. So yes, there's a different emphasis, but it could all be in there.
hmm.
If you notice that someone has a very strange opinion about where their head joins their neck, then of
Yeah,
course you're going to point it out.
yeah.
But the emphasis would be much more on coming to quietness, on regulation, because that'd be what would be most needed.
And so do people come via specific routes? So somebody will get in touch and say, I'm looking for some psychotherapy or I'm looking
Mm.
for some Alexander.
So almost always it's people I want to come for AT or I want to come for
Right. Yeah.
for therapy, and usually that's what we do.
Yeah.
90% of the time that's what we do, but sometimes it feels that something else is appropriate.
Yeah. So I'm interested in there are some areas where it clearly comes into informs each
Mm.
side,
Mm.
but I wonder whether there are areas where you keep things really separate, where
Mm.
you wouldn't go, I suppose, as an Alexander teacher, or you wouldn't go as a therapist.
I think no, I don't think there are anywhere I wouldn't necessarily go, but I think you've got to be very, very clear, and you've got to
Yeah.
make sure that you've got the person's consent and
Yeah.
that they're fully 100% with you, because
Yeah.
you can't do it on a whim, and you can't do it because you feel like it. So,
Yeah.
but if it felt justified and the person wanted to do it, then I don't think there's anywhere.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point, actually, that thing about people knowing what they're agreeing to.
Yes,
And if
yeah,
they've come for one thing, then knowing and what it might mean to have
yeah, exactly.
crossover.
Needs to be a
Um,
proper conversation. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so you've done a huge amount of reading, research. It's all in the book. I can see that. Are the ways that you make sense of your understanding of the two,
Mhm.
the kind of link up and crossover between the two from a more theoretical kind of side? They're not premised on exactly the same things, but again,
Yeah,
the crossover.
yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose one common link that I see is that they both involve tension and holding. They're both concerned with tension and holding in the
Yeah,
body in different ways, and that to me that's the obvious link. We hold tension in the body for lots of different reasons. We can hold it because we've got an inaccurate understanding of our bodies. We can hold it because we've been we've been in educational systems or whatever that haven't encouraged good use. We can hold it because we've been told to stand up straight, but we can also hold it because we've had unpleasant experiences, and for whatever reason, we haven't been able to process it, so the body's holding on.
Mm,
So is to me, it's really hard to differentiate. I use it in my book. I use a metaphor which I found really helpful actually when I was writing it, which is the idea of a tangled thread.
mm,
Which is we've all got our threads a bit tangled, and it's complex. It's complex. It's not just one thing. It's not just because we're pulling our head back. There's lots going on as to why we've got into this state,
mm,
and I find that metaphor helpful because I can think, well, what I'm really doing is hopefully I'm helping people to untangle their thread
mm.
before I'm thinking about is this AT, is this therapy? It's like, well, this thread's in a tangle. What can we do about it?
And coming to that, I guess, seeing the tangled thread and then thinking, and what skill can I bring to this situation
Mm.
to
Yeah.
to help untangle it?
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes, it's not always one thing because if someone have said they want AT, then I'll sort of assume that that's what we're doing, and we'll start from there. And often that's a really good place to start from.
I suppose the both think about, as you say, tension as being a common theme in
Mm.
both, but what that tension's doing and how it's interfering is maybe seen a little bit differently
Yeah.
from each side.
Yes. I think both sides are seeing a real phenomenon. Often they're coexisting.
Yeah,
So we might have got into the habit of holding ourselves in a really unfortunate way for numerous reasons, and we might also have trauma. We might also have
yeah,
experienced things that have made us additionally
yeah,
tense, and then it all gets tangled up. It's
yeah,
often it's very difficult to say, well, where does this begin and this end?
yeah.
We don't know.
And I really like that metaphor. I like the fact that it's not simple. I mean, that's realistic, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
wonderful
Yes.
complexity of human beings.
Yes, I know. I mean, there is this thing, isn't it? Well, the AT is really simple, and of course, in a sense, it is.
Hmm.
But also, we are very complex, and
Yeah,
so we can't necessarily
yeah,
come to us. So we can't treat our problem as simple because it's not.
yeah. So you talked about tension as being a commonality. Are there other kind of areas of sort of, or different
Um,
in terms of the theory and the understanding of it?
Well, I suppose I mean, from a body psychotherapeutic point of view, then I mean, both tend to be involved with the whole, and I think that's an advantage. I mean, I'm also trained in sort of traditional talk therapy, which is great too. But the body angle, there is an assumption that our thoughts and feelings and our body are intimately linked or indivisible, and
Mhm.
that's exactly the same on both sides.
Hmm.
Well, it should be anyway in AT and therapy that we're one system.
Just sort of moving on to the book, because as I
Mm.
say, you clearly did a lot of research. There's a lot of knowledge gone into that. How, when you were writing it, were you seeing, I read it as a kind of weaving together, I suppose.
Mm. Yes. Yeah.
And I just wondered how on earth you did that because,
It
it's a
was
phenomenal piece of work. So,
Thank you, thank you. It was actually the most unpleasant creative process of my life. It took 5 years, and it
right?
was really difficult because you think, I felt when I set out to write it, I felt really confident. I felt, I know this stuff, and I was doing it practically with clients, with myself, and I thought, no, this is going to be quite straightforward. And as soon as I started writing, I realized it was really not going to be straightforward because I think if you're learning to a large extent through practical experience, it's everything is joined up as a whole,
Yeah.
and then you have to stretch it out into a line.
Yeah.
And what I find is because it's all AT and therapy, it's such a holistic thing. There was this awful question of what has to come first, because you start with one thing, and then you realize say the next
Yeah.
thing before that, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and so it was really difficult, and it was a question of sort of breadcrumbing, like, when I'm going to just drop a little hint about this here, and then I'll talk about it more later, and it's sort of honing, and I used to be a cabinet maker actually, and I thought at times it's a bit like that. It's like honing or wood carving, just very
Yeah.
massaging
Yeah.
massaging things into place.
Yeah. And working out what the order of assembly is,
Exactly. And then the funny thing is, when I got to the end, I thought, well, that's exactly what I wanted to say. Why, that's exactly what I was intending to say at the beginning. Why has it taken 5 years? But that's what it took.
Well, things take their time. I think you say that in the book.
Yes, the things take as long as they take. Yes.
Yeah. And what have you learned? What have you gained from writing it? Has it changed
Mm.
things for you or made you think in a slightly different way or
Um,
clarified?
I think it forced me to think deeper because again, if you're working practically, you can gloss over things and the contradictions, they don't really matter. You can skim over them, no one notices. But when it's on paper, you have to think more deeply and you have to really, really think, does this make sense? And so I think that's the difference. I felt it feels like it makes more sense to me now.
Mm.
Um, Although in a way there's been a process, I think, since finishing it of sort of looking at it and thinking, well, where am I? And maybe getting bits back that because I was so into the writing, getting back to the doing of it again. Not that I
Mm.
wasn't doing it all the way through, but
No, but
um,
kind
yeah,
of coming to it, coming back to it.
yeah,
Yeah. Interested in another issue sometimes that gets raised about Alexander work and therapy is
mm,
you see Alexander as an educational model
mm,
and therapy as a, a different kind of model.
hmm.
Is there a tension there with therapy being something, well, I don't know.
Yes,
I
well,
don't
well,
really, yeah.
in a sense, yeah, because I mean, with AT, you are teaching something. Whatever else you're doing, you're teaching something.
Mm.
And so there has to be. Well, we're here and we're hoping to end up here. Whereas, particularly as a person-centered therapist, I've got no idea where we're going in therapy.
Mm.
It's like let's see what happens.
Mm.
So I think it's. But I suppose I've just come to see that as not a problem. If you need to become comfortable with ambiguity. You need to become comfortable with complexity and with weighing up technical, ethical decisions about what you're doing. And to me, that's the richness, and that's great.
Mm.
It's not a problem. It's
Mm.
great, but you have to take the conflict seriously, and you can't sweep it under the rug. It's there,
Yeah.
but you can name it and you can work with it.
Yeah. And actually it's the same, isn't it? You said earlier about clarity with people you're
Mm,
working with about what you're doing, but it's also clarity with yourself. And
yeah,
it's about where am I headed? Why am I making this decision? What
yeah,
am I actually doing? So you know what
yes,
you're doing consciously rather than something and not really knowing in your head what's going on.
exactly. And I think it helps to have a good supervisor or mentor or someone who
Yeah.
you can talk these things through with sometimes as well.
So I suppose my next question is around what sort of ideas or thoughts do you have for Alexander teachers who aren't qualified therapists?
Mm.
Other things that would be useful in their work, I suppose.
Well, I mean, the first thing I'd say is if you're working in a fairly traditional Alexander technique way, and you're approaching it in a kind and a non-doing kind of way, you're already a therapist.
Mm.
Because whether
Yeah.
or not we call it that, many people experience. I think Brigitte Mauer points this out. Many people experience AT lessons as therapeutic.
Yeah.
We might not think they
Absolutely.
should, but they do,
Yeah.
and and
No,
and
it has
they
a
and they get
therapeutic
they get
benefit.
therapeutic benefits.
Yeah.
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 So I suppose the first thing would be to maybe just have confidence that
Yeah.
that you are therapeutic, and among everything else,
Yeah.
you can be therapeutic. I mean, my experience has been that maybe some parts of the Alexander world have been worried about feelings a little bit, or we shouldn't let this stuff in. So maybe there's something about it's just part of being human. Feelings are okay; they're not in themselves dangerous. And maybe just to be more comfortable with allowing feelings into the room if one isn't. And I
Mm.
know a lot of Alexander teachers are, it's okay. It's okay that they've showed up. It's a sign that things are moving and things want to change. And
Mm.
they neither have to be sort of exalted and made the whole point, or swept under the carpet or
Mm.
subtly closed down, which I think can happen if we're not comfortable. The
Mm.
person feels ready to open and we sort of subtly close it down because, oh, I'm not sure,
Mm.
should I be doing
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Is this AT?
And it is that thing, isn't it? I suppose there's the sort of ideas that AT is this and not that.
Yeah.
Therefore, if this happens, something's gone wrong.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas actually very often something's gone right. It's a sign that a person feels safe, and it's a sign that their nervous system is settling enough to allow stuff to come up.
Hmm. And I'm struck in your book, and I think you mention it at the end, by the word gently. It
Mm.
comes up quite a lot. And I
Yes.
wonder if you could you say something about that? And because I think that's part of the how you manage
Mm.
when things come up.
Yes. Yes. Well, yes, I suppose. And again, I suppose coming from a sort of person-centered background, it feels very natural for me that it's about giving space and it's about not pushing.
Hmm.
And I suppose the other thing to give AT teachers confidence in this area is that we're already really good at that. You
Mm.
know, hopefully, we're already good at allowing, at letting things come up, at not getting in there and trying to fix things. And that's the whole thing
Yeah,
in both camps. That's the whole thing.
yeah,
So obviously it's transferring that to a new domain. And I guess I'm not advocating that people just sort of dive in willy-nilly and say, oh, I can, let's start processing really serious trauma. That's not what I'm suggesting, but
yeah.
just maybe you can have a bit more confidence about your skills in that area.
And how would you suggest people might know the limit of their skills? Because there is a value in knowing this feels okay and oh no,
Well, I
and
think
how to manage that.
well, I think we do know, actually. I think we do know. And so I guess if we know, then we have to be honest with ourselves and we have to, refer to someone else, which we all need to do sometimes. We can't all cover all bases.
Yeah,
But also, I mean, there's a lot of value in just getting some training, CPD. Why not do it in that area? And maybe the scope of what feels comfortable will increase.
yeah. And I guess I wonder if it's also if you see that you're coming to a limit, not having to be afraid of that.
Yeah, no, you don't. It's just that. It's just a limit, and you can acknowledge it. And
Yeah,
I mean, things we do make mistakes. We all, as AT teachers, as therapists, we make mistakes.
yeah,
It's inevitable, and I can think of mistakes I've made in the past, and I think, I wish that hadn't happened. But you can acknowledge it, and we can,
yeah,
you can get help if you need it, and you can
yeah.
just be responsible about it, I think.
And I think, yeah, open and acknowledging those things is the way
Yeah.
really. That's
Yes.
how to repair mistakes.
Yes, and I suppose that's about not leading to feel like you've got it all under control,
Mm,
acknowledging that you haven't, because we haven't.
no, and nobody has, I suspect.
Exactly,
And if
exactly.
they think
Yeah,
they have, maybe they haven't.
yeah.
Do you feel psychotherapy training has enriched your Alexander work?
Yes, yeah, yeah, immeasurably, and vice versa, I'd say. Yeah,
Right. And can you say how?
I guess it's given me the confidence to work with more things.
Hmm.
Um, and I've talked a lot about trauma, but also just how emotion sort of shows up in people's lives and how it shows up in their bodies. And you can talk into that, you can go into that, you can role play, you can sort of explore what happens in the body when some kind of when you think about something that's going on in your life, and you can be interested in it,
Hmm.
and maybe some interesting understanding, like somatic understanding or intellectual understanding, or both will come out of that.
Hmm.
And I suppose it's just made me think wider,
Hmm.
more broadly.
And it seems to me that there's a lot of curiosity in your approach. A lot of,
Mm.
well, let's explore and see and find out what the effect of that is, what impact that has, rather than this is
Yes.
how we do it, kind of.
Yeah. So assuming that we know, because
Yeah.
theory is really useful, but it's also, in my experience, usually things are a lot more complicated than theories, and they're a lot more nuanced, and they're a lot more interesting.
Hmm.
And sometimes theories can give us a little bit of a steer, but
Hmm.
but really it comes back to what's really happening here,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
actually going on, and that's always new, and it's never the same twice.
I'm wondering if there's anything you feel I've missed or anything you wanted to say.
Yeah, I mean, something actually, something extra I'll say is that again, traditionally there was sometimes in the Alexander world of a feeling, well, we're separate, we're apart. There's other people doing strange things, but we're
Mhm.
us. But when I got interested in body psychotherapy, I realized that the Alexander technique already has a place there, because
Mm.
there are different broad sort of approaches, like developmental approaches, there's trauma-informed approaches, there are process-based approaches, and there's what's called adjustment approaches,
Mm.
like Feldenkrais, like Alexander technique, where the working from the assumption that at some level it's through making alterations in the way we are physically, then that affects the way
Mm.
we are mentally. So all of that's already understood in that sort of somatic mind body therapies world. So there's a place there waiting. If
Mm.
we can choose to be sort of our own little thing, but also there's a world that we already belong in.
Mm.
The thinking's already been done. if you see what I mean.
And yet, I think it feels to me relatively recent, and maybe I'm completely wrong about this, that the idea that Alexander technique has an emotional outcome, or maybe it's what
Yes.
everyone knew but nobody talked about.
Well, I think it's always been there. I think in the past it's been quite difficult to, if you're of that point of view, it has been quite hard to raise that
Mhm.
sometimes. But I think it's changing, and I think it's changed a lot over the
Yeah,
last, particularly over the last 10 years.
yeah,
I think it's radically different because I guess simply as people have explored more and more things, you can't not see the parallels.
yeah,
You can't not see that wonderful though the AT is. And it's probably in terms of, mind body stuff that I've done, it's probably the one I value the most. There's a whole world out there, and
yeah,
these other perspectives are equally as valid and equally as useful.
yeah. An understanding of embodied emotion, or yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
role of embodiment in people's well-being is, I guess, much more to the fore.
exactly. Yes, it's just overdue, I think. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much. That's been really interesting and thought-provoking, and I like the kind of the way each informs the other and
yeah.
how each enriches the other.
Thank you.
Um, we will put a link to the book in the notes.
Hmm.
So if anyone's interested, they can find it.
Great.
Ease and skill. And yeah, it's been really interesting. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank
Thank
you.